So what I would like to do is do not just schizophrenia, but also talk about bipolar and manic depressive. And I'm not even completely clear on all the differences. So let's talk about these first, just briefly. It seems that the big difference between schizophrenia and bipolar is schizophrenia is has people actually lose touch with reality. In fact, that was one thing I read on the web. That was like the basis of it, right? Whereas also someone said it's quite different as in the brain as to serotonin, and that actually bipolar is a lack of serotonin, right? Any thoughts on the difference here? Because the difference is important as to how we, the question here, is it going to be different the way we approach these issues? Schizophrenia versus bipolar and manic depressive. So, yeah, schizophrenia is delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, trouble thinking, lack of motivation, inability to distinguish between real and unreal experiences. Whereas bipolar is a strong shift in energy, so it's more emotional energy shift. A person, extreme excitement to mania, depression. They affect your ability to perform daily activities. Some cases, a person with bipolar may experience hallucinations and delusions. Somebody have a comment there?
Yeah, I have a comment. First of all, I would say that the symptoms across the board in both categories. So there are people with bipolar who have delusions, and there are people with schizophrenia who have mood components in what's going on.
Cool.
And also the theories about what neurotransmitters are high and what neurotransmitters are low. Science hasn't got 100% evidence really yet what's going on in the brain. The theory with schizophrenia is that the high dopamine causes the delusions and the paranoid thinking, but I wish it was as clean cut as that. Like, I think those of us who are not familiar with the disease think, oh, you'll take a medication and everything will be fine. And the atypical antipsychotics are mainly dopamine blockers. Mm-hmm. And then with bipolar, it's very complex, because you have people who have the classical cycling of having periods where they're depressed and then periods that they're manic. But there's what's called mixed bipolar, where these moods can intermingle. And there's also a combination of bipolar with schizophrenia, which is schizoaffective disorder. And personally, I think one of the best ways to categorize maybe for music treatment, although I don't know enough about the sound treatment, would be to look at the symptoms themselves and not look at the labels. And the more I talk to the really advanced doctors, they always say, put the labels aside. They're really not important.
Cool.
What's important is to deal with the symptomology. And I think one very interesting area is in schizophrenia is the auditory hallucinations. My son doesn't have auditory hallucinations, but from being part of the community, that seems one of the most torturous things going on. And it just makes complete sense that listening to music will distract them from those terrible voices. And then delusions is simply, it's as if you're living in a dream. You have thoughts, you have theories. I call it, having delusions is really when the veil is very thin. And when I say the veil, a lot of us here are sensitive people, so maybe all of us have, experienced psychic phenomena. It's that. It's like you're going into different worlds. So I would look at the symptoms.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Excellent. Yeah, we'll talk about it in detail in a bit, that, there's a lot of cultures that look at this as a gift, right? as opposed to a problem. I mean, also there's the threshold between channeling, where Tom Kenyon is having all these different higher beings going through his voice, versus people that, you know, are have other things coming through. So very cool. Excellent. Thank you for that. That was really helpful. Really helpful. So let's look at the conceptual framework, the approach. You know, what I've got in these treatment plans is I've always got the aspect of peace that work for anything. So if you get somebody into a place of peace and stillness with consistent, stable crystal bowls, consistent tones like crystal bowls, Tibetan bowls, everything we do in sound healing is stable, consistent tones, and that's the definition of peace. Not to mention a slow fade that leaves you in that point of complete stillness, right? This is generally good for anything. Peace is always good for anything. That's pretty general, but it can help physically, mentally, emotionally. It's always good. Now, there's quite a few things around this. You can actually just play consistent tones, but you can also play music. And so there's some research to be done as to what music might help the most. So it's interesting, because I mean, music therapists generally say, well, you know, everybody likes different music. It's totally up to what they like. Well, that's true, but there's certain aspects of music that are better for certain types of situations. First of all, you know, I mean, I could get into it in detail because I teach audio recording. I wrote the #1 selling book in the world in audio recording and producing. And there's very specific things that I think could help, but that's a little too complex for here. But I think there's a lot of research to be done where we could actually take a group of people with different issues like schizophrenia and play different music and see if there's a certain parameters of the music that work better, and then start reverse engineering that as well. Let's see, somebody got their mic on. Oh, Shakina. Did you want to say something, Shakina? No?
Sorry, no, somehow.
Okay, I'll mute you. Okay, so research as to the music could be really good. But also, you know, the main thing, if you're working with somebody, is to play different music and just take really detailed notes, not only on the music, but also on the sounds that you're using, which ones seem to work. Knowing that one may work one day, especially with schizophrenia and these different issues, that it may work one day and not another. So research could be good. Getting them to play sounds and finding out what works for them when they actually, so getting them involved can be cool. Although, here's the main thing that I think of, because I've had different students over the years that have worked with these disorders, and they say that depending on the level, it's just wild, you know, because one day they could play some sounds that are totally incredible and get them to a very peaceful state, and another day the exact same sounds could trigger trigger them going out, or some really interesting response, right? So the #1 thing when working with this issue is to watch like a hawk and change the sound the second that you see any uncomfortable reaction, right? So therefore, I often think as the number one aspect is calming. Because
I'm sorry. Why do we stop when they have an uncomfortable reaction?
well, if they're going out and becoming another person and completely going into a reactive, violent behavior or something that's like really wild and just like way, crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. I think
the right practitioner could kind of work with them and walk them through it slowly and help them.
Well, that's what we're saying. Is I mean, let me backtrack here. We are not therapists. We are not professional therapists, so we're working in the best way we can with Spirit, Spirit's help. I mean, of course we want to go through slowly and calmly, but what I'm saying is if you see a reaction that is not good, then the point is to watch closely. Because some people, when they're playing instruments, they get into a zone and they close their eyes and they're like totally, channeling, and they don't even notice what's going on with their client. And so it's just really important to watch really closely what's going on so that you can stop if there's...
I'm just asking because I've been doing this with my brain injury patients, and I don't want to hurt them. I love them.
This is not brain injury.
Yeah,
we'll get to brain injury in a little bit. Yeah, we're talking about schizophrenia. Yeah, what we're talking about here? Look, we're on sound for schizophrenia, bipolar, and manic depressive.
Right, I know, but all the brain is one. So I mean, we're kind of talking about all of them all together.
What is it you're saying?
David, I wanted to add, maybe I can give my experience having a son who is going through this.
Cool.
You know how when people get very tired, all of us, when we get tired at night, it's sometimes very uncomfortable for us to listen to loud music. I think we all have that. So in schizophrenia, you become very hypersensitive to everything. You're like a little leaf, and so something that's uncomfortable is going to make you extremely uncomfortable. We're just in a very sensitive mood, and I think that's why it is very important not to let them get to a state that they're uncomfortable and not necessarily violent. There's a lot of bias. People think that schizophrenia is violence. That's not the case. Many schizophrenics are not violent, but sensitives, yes, extremely, extremely sensitive.
Cool, thank you. So, so if you were to, this is the same as with panic attacks, right? That people that are having panic attacks, their system is blown wide open. They're hypersensitive. So this means no gongs, no Tibetan bowls, especially Tibetan bowls with a wood stick. This means no activating sounds. This means really calming vowels like ooh, lower frequencies instead of higher frequencies. There's a whole hierarchy of things in my book that are activating versus calming, and it's pretty obvious, but so you may think, oh, we'll just do a gong bath and get them, in the zone because it's consistent, stable. Well, no, that could be way too much. In fact, a crystal bowl could be way too much. Way too much, especially loud volumes. Maybe a large crystal bowl could be where you're getting more bass could be better, right? And so this is really important to be very careful with anything that's over activating in a session. You may think, oh, I'm just bringing in spirit, but that person is just, their nervous system is just screaming because it's too much, right? So, calming and watch closely are the main areas here. Now, it's interesting is there's a large component here of emotional control, right? And they talk about cognitive behavior for bipolar to be able to deal with emotions, even though it's much more chemical and actually built into the brain. Let me show you something here that's really amazing. Look at the difference between a schizophrenic brain scan and a healthy brain scan. I mean, this is, no small deal sometimes, right? This isn't always the case, but it's like there's way less activity going on in a large part of the brain because it's frazzled, right? The way I always talk about it is the difference between chaotic vibrations and stable, consistent vibrations. Right? So when the brain has a disorder like this, it's scattered, it's chaotic, it's not a consistent rhythm. So one of the best things, and I haven't tried it with schizophrenia because there's still the component of sensitivity, is is to actually use binaural beats and brainwave entrainment, but specifically tuned to that person. And we do this at the Institute. Jeffrey Thompson's the leader in this area. The first thing you can do is watch the rhythm of that person, the rhythm of how they move. How fast are they moving? Really slow, right? Are they moving fast, right? And match their rhythm if you're doing drumming, because a lot of people said they're doing drumming here. Match their rhythm. Ideally, what we do is we play each of the 12 rhythms and notes, and we actually watch them. And when somebody's really sensitive, it's really easy to see which one matches them. Let me give you a quick example here of some of these, of the 12 rhythms here. Okay. So each one of these little tones is not only the note, but if you octavize that note, cut it in half, 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 the rhythm is the same note as the note that you hear. Versus a middle rhythm, a faster rhythm. Versus a really fast rhythm. So when you play these different rhythms, you can just simply watch, and it's often you can ask them, and it's often really easy to tell when people are really sensitive. And then you're playing music, whether you're doing it live or actually creating music for them that is tuned to their metabolism, to their average of their heart rate and brainwave rate when they are at peace. I think this is really huge for, as we'll talk about, for traumatic brain injuries as well, but for basically any issue, because it gets the person back to their stable vibration. So I just point this out because, people that are really sensitive can't handle rhythms that aren't tuned to them often. I had this one woman in the class, and I was playing the binaural beats, whoa, 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 and she started bawling. She said, "I can't be in here, it's making me crazy." And I had the whole class tune into her and intuitively find her note, and 70% of the people found A. I tuned the rhythm to the note of A, and she went cool, and was totally fine the rest of the class. So this is really important to know. People were talking about playing crystal bowls. Crystal bowls are cool, but rhythms are way more effective for especially something that's around the brain, which I think includes schizophrenia. So if you're going to do rhythm, I believe it's critical that you really pay close attention to what tempo you're doing for that person and match them. You can totally see it. When I do any treatments on anybody, I'm always watching as to what tempo works, and I just intuitively tune in. Speed up, slow down, and watch their reaction. Okay. Any thoughts so far? Oops.
I just want to make sure I understand. It's the tempo of their aura, of their...
It's technically what we're talking about. It's the tempo of their heart, an average of the heart as it goes up and down, but more importantly, it's the brain waves. We're really matching their brain waves when they're actually at peace, right? And that's because brain waves don't go up and down.
Oh, they're connected to EEGs, and we're watching these things?
No, as I just said, you can just simply watch and see where they're comfortable. I mean, EEG would be the best. That's what Jeffrey Thompson does EKG and EEG. But, I just play each of the 12 notes and ask. I've worked with people that can't even speak with autism where we've done this, and you can see they just get still because it's a little annoying. Those rhythms are annoying to a lot of people, right? I mean, if it's not theirs, and then just the second you get to the right one, you can see they get still. It's pretty obvious normally, and often they can tell you.
Yeah, David, this works in the same way acoustically. In my experience experimenting, I work with autism. I also work with a lot of different cross-cultural groups, and so conditioning what their state of homeostasis is, what particular rhythm, where they're at. You can actually reproduce this somewhat acoustically in the same way, although you can't maintain it as long as you can with binaural beats, but you can definitely observe and see that happening.
Yeah, and of course anything live with a live person is always going to have that energy, which is better than, if you're trying to do binaural beats. But, I mean, the advantage, you're totally right, if you can give them music to listen to with those binaural beats, tuned to delta for sleep, because often there's sleep problems, theta for creativity to get them in the zone, alpha for presence, which could be too much for schizophrenia, but still it's stable, and then beta, which generally I'd probably stay away from, even though it's still tuned to them, it's still peaceful. Beta is quite activating. It's like, it may be too much, but maybe not. You just test it and really watch closely, right? So,
I'm going to add just one last thought on that too, dovetailing that. It's interesting, and I notice this a lot working with kids. You attune yourself to as they come in. Your presence starts the moment they enter the room, and often their natural rhythms is kind of chaotic and higher frequency. And so we just start often, and it's they who've taught me this as my clients. They just start with a drum roll. And because they're also searching for that proper attunement within themselves.
Oh, that's very cool. Have them find their natural rhythm just by playing it.
Where it needs to go. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, one thing that I've learned is often people, let me put it this way. When you see somebody, the first thing you see is how scattered or stable they are, right? It's like, or like spiritual leader, perfectly still, right? The second thing you see is how fast they move. And you can have somebody really fast that's scattered or stable, and you can have somebody really slow that's scattered or stable. We commonly confuse scattered with fast. So you still want to watch. They could be totally a slow metabolism, which is generally more heavy set, not always, and actually be still very scattered, and actually be a very slow metabolism that you need to find, right? Cool. Very cool. Excellent. Yeah, it never occurred to me. Just have them start playing something, and when they start playing something, they're going to naturally go to a rhythm that feels good for them, right? That's very cool. Or, what you can do also is have them tap faster and slower. That's a good way to do it, because you're not so using the physical body so much, so you're not like basing it on their muscles. You're basing it on just the actual tempo that will actually be good for them, and they can often find it. Maybe you could tap for them even.
If I may say something, I usually, when a client comes in, they have to get entrained to the music. So I have a background music of 5 to 8 hertz, and at first they're agitated, and then they get entrained to it after a while to the 5 to 8 hertz. The 5 to 8 hertz it's harmonious, and it's generally goes with everyone. It's so I would suggest trying to do the 5 to 8 hertz.
Yeah, I would. I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too much, but Leonard Horowitz has now admitted that 528 hertz has nothing to do with love, and there's zero research that has anything to do with it unraveling the DNA. So most people in the field have abandoned it, are using 432. But concert pitch is not that big a deal, I don't think, as much as the energy and the flow of the music. I mean, if you have a song that's full of love and higher energy, the tuning concert pitch is not that big a deal, although I still like 432 better. There's even one research project that shows that 528 tuning actually makes people more agitated, because it's above the normal frequency for natural instruments, that the way they're made these days. Okay, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole too far, just so you know. Okay, so these are a few things as far as, well, here's one other big area: expressing emotions with sound. Right? So this could be, it's interesting. I often think of it, I'll mute Rona here, unless you have something to say. No? Okay. So expressing emotions, generally, that's too activating. If you have somebody with a panic attack and you say, make the sound of how you're feeling, that will trigger it worse, right? So although there could be a component where that person has been shut down, and that's what's causing the schizophrenia. They can't express anything. So maybe you should go through a whole thing on being able to express how they feel, which might mean doing call and response first to get them comfortable making sound. But my first intuition here is to stay away from this, and because it can, if someone starts going, it could actually get them going and triggered. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so once again, in that I do mostly live client work, often group work, individuals will themselves emit an expression or express a sound. And you kind of, again, if it's something they repetitiously use and you see that they seem in a more homeostasis state or more calm state, I interactively will make sounds with them. So I use voicing. I don't call it singing. I use voicing. Even though I'm a trained singer, I use voice work in that way. And I think that's, again, another tool you can put in your tool belt.
Cool. Yeah, I would just, when you were saying that, I would say again, just watch really closely. If someone's really fragile and sensitive and prone to going off, and we're not talking about violent, we're talking just going into another realm, right? Then just be really careful with anything activating like this. Otherwise, go for it, right? I mean, getting them in their body is huge, right? I think that's really huge. I mean, playing tuning forks on the body, playing, big Tibetan bowls or any Tibetan bowls physically on the body, a big, hand drum on the body. I mean, those they could trigger, because that's where we're talking intense. It can be too much. So you got to watch. But getting them physically in their body and just watching what works. I would try the sound table, but I would be there watching the whole time while they're doing the sound table. I would not leave them while they're actually on the sound table or sound lounge, right? But so sounds physically on the body. Breath work could be very cool, but that could create more dopamine, so you got to be careful with that.
I'm just wondering, David, my youngest son, when he was alive, he one time in particular, he had cerebral palsy, and he was physically in stress, and I was trying to calm him, and I just started making the sounds that he was making, and eventually that allowed him to so I just kind of made sounds with him. And, I don't know how this would work with, it might be something, at least wouldn't work in a group setting necessarily, but, just sort of somehow meeting them where they're at. And then moving, helping to move with them to a different.
Cool. Excellent. I think that's really critical. Number one thing that people have said in the classes, because we've had this in our degree program, is no judgment, and to connect to them as they are a perfect spirit in every way. I mean, this is critical. If people are really hypersensitive, they're actually often totally intuitive, totally psychic. They can sense energy really well. So it's critical that you are running the energy of pure, perfect spirit in every way. Nothing wrong with you. Which we can, let's see. Into spirit. Oh, there's one other before we get into that. There's the area of doing sound to release stuck emotions. Right. There's two areas here that we do, and I'll just go over them briefly because they're full courses. One is making this doing sound to release an emotion. Right? Right? You can actually also take the emotion and slowly shift it. This could be really cool. I could say, okay, this is the sound that I'm sensing of where you're at right now. Whatever comes out, right? Or what do you feel? What's the sound of where you're at? Just do it briefly. Okay, cool. Where we're going to go is to a stable, consistent sound. Now let's do it slowly. Where you're at now. Do it really slowly, maybe even 5 minutes, until you're two. That's one technique. The other is to make the sound that the part of the body wants you to make that's holding that emotion. So you have them tune into where they're feeling it in the body, right? So there's all these different techniques. You can even take the emotion and make it small and then throw it away and then actually bring in universal love. There's all these techniques for releasing emotions with the voice, which could be really helpful if they're dealing with emotions that are hard to control. Any thoughts on that?
Sure, I can add a little bit to that. Simply, I learned this from Chloe Goodchild on another network, and it's using your name, and it's using it as an kind of in the phoneme sense of it, in that you elongate and slide more into the vowels and consonants, and you focus on getting to a tailing point where you find that stable frequency. Asking the client, where do you feel it? Where do you notice it? What does it feel like? What are the characteristics? And getting them to work with that. And I use three things. I use the name, I do humming and sirening, doing that. Cool. And then finding that pitch where it suddenly feels like, that's the right spot for me.
Cool. Great. Excellent. So, Vicki Dodd, who teaches for us, she actually says, take your name and spin it in a blender round and round and then start humming it. Right? That's very cool. Yeah, any way you can get them to actually do toning, which is any vowel, which is a stable, consistent vibration of peace. Peace is a frequency humming consistently, or rhythm. Right. Okay, excellent. There's one other thing that we do, and this is a little more advanced, but it can be really helpful. There's 10 techniques for being able to be at peace in the midst of challenge. And, what we do is we teach allowing, toning, finding your home note, welcoming, gratitude, compassion, love, and making the sound of those and bringing it to the actual issue that's triggering you, so that you can create a stable, consistent vibration of love in you, right? Instead of what's going on, or go to compassion, all these, whatever resonates with the person. And those can be really effective for being able to deal with things that trigger. They've helped me big time. Helped me really big time. Okay. So there's those. Now, there's one other aspect that a lot of people may not think of, and this is, I did my round of psychedelics in my younger years, right? And I know it's like there's a movie, let me put it this way. There's a movie called Crazy Wise that's on Gaia, if you haven't seen it, that's really cool. And it's basically how people around the world in different cultures deal with schizophrenia. Many cultures see it as a gift. And they think, you're able to actually channel. You're able to access higher energies. So they don't make it wrong. In our society, which we've just talked about, we've labeled that person as a problem, as being screwed up. Right? And this is really a core problem of dealing with this issue. Any issue. The second you label somebody and you say, you are not normal, right? Although I learned a long time ago that not being normal is the deal. But we are society-oriented people where we want to be accepted, right? And it's huge, right? So to realize that these people are not shut down. They are wide open, ready to access higher energies. So if you're able to access any higher energies of Source or Spirit or Hathors or any higher beings, go for it, because often they will totally go with you. I mean, so here's a question, because often what I go, there's two ways to go here. You could say, okay, we need to bring you down and ground you in the earth. Get your shoes off, really do tuning forks on the bottom of the feet. What gets you in the body? We need to ground you. And then the other is, well, if you're going to go on flights of fancy and trip out, let's work with that energy and direct it, right? And direct it into the light. It's just like doing psychedelics. You could totally go into darkness, or you could go into the light. You just got to direct it and set the atmosphere to be able to create a beautiful trip, right? And then all of a sudden we're accessing light beings, which will totally heal them. Am I too out there? Let's see what's Art saying.
I think this is super cool. My maternal grandmother was schizophrenic, and she gave birth to 5 sets of twins. And she could play concert. She played by ear. She played concert piano or classical piano, and she had voices. She had she had like 5 characters that she used to talk to, and she scared the shit out of me when I was a kid.
I love it. It's
looking back, like, she was totally. I mean, I wish I could have a conversation with her today.
I've had people that I've worked with where they're like, I just had a bout with this dark entity yesterday, and I'm like, okay, do you say that's ridiculous? You should just ground and just ignore that. That's just in your head. Mm-hmm. Instead, what I say is, here are the techniques you can use to actually deal with that dark entity. You can actually wrap light all around it and ask for help from angels, right? And do that instead of ignoring it, instead of saying, no, your reality is ridiculous, you're crazy. No, just actually work within that realm energetically.
I kind of feel like this is the key to sound healing, especially if we want to bring this to mainstream medical. It can't be too complicated. We can't pretend like we're, fixing diabetes with a tone. It has to be about accepting the whole person. I feel like bipolar is like this. Like, we all have ups and downs and highs and lows and dark nights of the soul and all that. And cool. I don't know. I don't want to get on a rant, but I just love this. I just wanted to share that.
Cool. Yeah. So I'm going to go to an area. I mean, this area here that I'm just talking about wouldn't normally be accepted in the medical field, right? It's like, oh, so you're actually going to deal with these entities that they're seeing, or that pink unicorn that hangs out with them. You're going to actually accept that? I'm like, yes. Well, that pink unicorn could actually do healing. Normalize it. Let's talk with that pink unicorn. What does the pink unicorn what does it sound like, that pink unicorn? Let's sing with it, right? It's like, I don't know if that would be accepted in medical, but I would go for it, right? Because the medical is like, you're crazy, let's get out of the realm of the pink unicorn back into the drug body. Right? And it's like kind of crazy. Okay. So, but here's the deal, right? I have this woman that's a close friend who works with a whole ward that her job is she works in San Rafael with a whole group of schizophrenics and just full range of people that are extreme cases of this. And she is a total psychic intuitive. And she says, Dave, they're totally got entities. Can't exactly talk about this in the medical field, but she said they got entities. I had this guy in class years ago, and he was like just going off. He was like really amped and just kind of interrupting the class. It was like really hard to have him in the class. And at one point I said to him, I don't know why, but it felt appropriate at the time, maybe you got an entity. And he goes, oh yeah, the general has been here for 10 years. I've been trying to get rid of him and I can't get rid of him. So we put him in the middle of the room and we all toned with the intention of getting rid of the entity. And he came back the next day and he said, Dave, after 10 years, the general is gone. And his energy changed drastically. Right? So then, I've got like this medical intuitive that taught me how to work with entities. He says, call in Jesus, call in Archangel Michael and say, go now. This one said, bring in the energy of Neptune and embody Neptune and it will get rid of it, right? So there's different ways to energetically send them into the light. If that resonates with you, you might try it and learn more about it. If you think I'm crazy, don't tell anybody.
David, I just wanted to share about my son, who has always been a great actor anyway. He channels these rappers, and I feel them coming in. And you said you have to let the person in. If they like the music, it does good for them. In this case, I don't think it does good for him. It's very negative energy, and I feel him pulling that negative energy into him through the music. So what do I do? Do I tell him, don't listen to that music? We've tried to suggest other music, but it's very difficult to do that. He's very entranced with them.
So here's the deal. Okay, this is what I would say, and I had some conversations about this as well. First of all, you can say, there's some dark energies in there that you seem to be taking on. Do you notice that? Right? And just talk to him about that so he starts to realize that there's these energies. And then say, it's like if someone's listening to rap, the trick is not to shift it to a different style of music. The trick is to shift it to a different style of rap. And say, hey, have you heard this rap song? There's so many cool rap artists that are really positive. I mean, there's tons of really incredibly positive rap music out there. If you look for it, it's there. So do a little research and say, check out this song. See the energy of it, And that's my thought about it.
Thank you. Thanks.
Can I add something as well from maybe a therapeutic point of view?
Yeah.
So I guess maybe one of the things that kind of comes to my mind is that negative rap is, you can look at it rather than, penetrating into him, is really resonating what is in him. He maybe is drawn to it because it's expressing where he's at. And then it becomes, if you look at what you'd call motivational interviewing, which is, how motivated is he to change? If he's not, which he would be at a level 1, which is then to really just provide information about, what if it was shifting? Do you like where it's at? Do you like what this is? You maybe point out to him how it's affecting his life. And if he doesn't like how his life is unfolding, then that is information for him to start thinking about change.
Yeah.
That's my two.
Nice. Mm-hmm. What occurred to me also is, hey, have you thought about getting into recording and becoming a rap artist? If you're doing that, how about, I bet that you could actually get him to do positive rap because he's not totally negative at all, and he would want to do that. He said, let's get on the path of changing this rap to positive energy, or let's do a research project and check out different rap and see why do you really like it because of the negative energy, or is it because of what they are doing in the production? And let's differentiate the production from their energy and notice what's really cool. Rappers. I mean, there's like really cool rappers and music production that is incredible versus, that is still completely different.
He actually did a lot of recordings before, and it was a lot of positive stuff and a lot of mixing. But recently he's got worse and he stopped making music. It's getting worse. Yeah.
I would really recommend him talking him into it, saying, let's do a song about where you're at right now and how to transform it.
Yeah.
And there's, so get him back into it to actually use the music to transform his emotions. Okay. I like this. It's cool. Okay. So here's the intake questions. The safety guidelines are first. Someone said, never work on someone in an active schizophrenic episode. I don't know if that's completely true, because we are light beings, but someone said that. Don't make it wrong. If things are out of control, don't be afraid to get help, right? Because we are not trained therapists. Okay. Okay, good. Intake questions. You can look at it. I'm going to post all this on the site afterwards. Okay. Okay. There's one other thing I wanted to point out. These are examples of what we just talked about. Okay. Imagining a new life, creating a new lifestyle. That's one thing. You can talk about that and then actually do it with sound. Imagine what it would be like and what it would feel like. Let's see. Shamanic drumming. Get them in theta. Dealing with entities. It's a gift. Let them know this is a gift, not a problem. Are they helping? Okay. Now, here is ultimately where I think we can go. And this is some serious research, is my guess and understanding is there's some endocrine gland that has gone haywire, whether it's the pineal, pituitary, hypothalamus, maybe even the thymus or thyroid, whatever. But once we get where we're able to measure, which I think they can do now, I know we just measured my thyroid with a blood test, right? So when you can measure all these and then find the frequency to actually resonate them back into that person's natural frequency of their endocrine gland, right? Someone said find the frequency of choline, find the frequency of the receptor that's missing, right? This could be huge. I think there's really a lot of potential to be able to do this and to actually do research with our funding that's coming in. I think that's probably the most detailed that I think of as far as really getting into this at a detailed level. Any thoughts on this as to how we might go further? I mean, it's really kind of crazy that there's practically zero research around these glands and what the frequency of them are and how to balance them throughout the system. It's tricky because, you throw them off and it could be even worse. So you really got to be careful, right? But, I mean, Tom Kenyon talks about the pineal gland's crystal. I mean, we know that it's made of crystals. It's a frequency device. I know what I wanted to talk about, that I wanted to mention. in this idea that people are crazy when they start seeing things and hearing voices, Tom Kenyon, in my conference last year, Tom Kenyon has a talk that's on the internet where he talks about the difference between him channeling these beings and someone who was had a being come in where she tried to break the window out of the airplane, right? And they took her away. Actually, one of his clients. And so it's really interesting there's a fine line besides. So this is what you could do, is you could let people know, you could say, hey, all of those voices or those trips that you take, that if with a little bit of mind control, you could direct them into the light, and you could totally create unbelievable energies that you would just love. Right? So I see that as a really huge. It's basically psychedelic therapy. Although we're not using psychedelics because they've got their own psychedelics going on in their brain, right? Psychedelic therapy. Lead them into the light. And all of a sudden it's a party, right? I learned this a long time ago when I had panic attack. Instead of freaking out and going into fear, I would just put on soft music, turn the lights down low. I got really nice lighting now, and just create an atmosphere and meditate on universal love, right? And just go into bliss. I thought, okay, I'm having a panic attack, time to trip out and have fun.
David, I've also, I keep going back to this, but the idea of participatory sound therapy, and something I've been experimenting more this year with individual clients, as opposed to having them in a comfortable, reclined, supine, or some kind of position, I actually had them participate and had them play some of their own instruments. And I'm just thinking out loud here, taking this concept and the idea of producing something that has a more positive, more redeeming value to the individual. I've been working with a sound software called Soundtrap as a recording device, and using it's a digital audio software program, and you can record your own rap. You can record your own sound healing. That's something that you can take with you and use in your own at your own discretion. So just a thought.
Cool. Excellent. Well, we got a lot of good ideas. One thing that my favorite for anything is imagine what it would be like if these episodes or this energy was completely gone. And then not only make the sound of it, but visualize it, create a vision board, do all this work as to what would your life be if it were completely gone, and run that energy through your body with sound of what it sounds like, and then just keep doing that over and over, because the body doesn't know any difference, and then the body immediately starts running flow through the whole system. That's always one of the best. Any other thoughts on this before we move on?
I was just curious because I'm new to your organization and the other things that I have studied, we always have an assessment tool. So I'm wondering what kind of assessment tool you might have that would show what types of, if you were going to use like the brain sounds, the pituitary, hypothalamus sounds, and try to balance that out. Is there an assessment tool that would show which ones seem to stand out the most for somebody? So you would know how to balance it?
Yeah. And we've got some basic ones that aren't that detailed. I mean, we do have voice analysis that will tell you, whether all the notes are balanced in your system. We have a system called the Nutrienergetics that will tell you as well. But really, the main way to go here is EEG more than anything. EKG is helpful too, but EEG is but even EEG is not that detailed as to what is actually going on. It's actually pretty rough because we don't know energy and thoughts. It doesn't show energy and thoughts precisely, or thought patterns, right? So it's even that is not. I mean, the other way you could do it, of course, is just a form, right? It's probably the most effective of all. How grounded do you feel? I mean, a form that just goes through a psychological form that asks all the questions as to where they're at and how they're feeling in different areas. That's probably the most effective. Just so you know, in case you're new here, on the Medical Sound Association, we have intake forms here, and we're getting pretty far along, where you can actually, when you do a session, you can say what's the issue, what instruments you're using, and on a scale of 1 to 10, you put in before and after the treatment. And look what we've got. We've now got over 300, let's see, oops, where it went away? Okay, integrative sound, intake, okay, here we are. We've already got things here, 327 entries, and we got 65% reduction in symptoms. So you could go in here and say, okay, for anxiety, right, filter that. Okay, they had 199 entries, almost 70% reduction in symptoms. Okay, or anxiety with crystal bowls, right? Or we'll say anxiety with drums, see if we got anything for that. Only 6 for drumming, but 80% reduction. With crystal bowls, there's about 160, I know. And so it's really cool data. Although not that scientific, it's still something you could use for yourself. So, or if you're doing any treatments, go here on the Medical Sound Association site and enter it. Because it'll be really cool when we have 10,000 entries there. And we can say, look, traditional medicine's only 30% effective. We're doing 60 to 70% effectiveness. Okay. I love this, what Arit said. Perhaps it's time to introduce them to spiritual practices, right? Spiritual practices can be really cool. And some they're going to resonate with, some they may not. But if they latch on, then they've got a channel for those energies. Okay. Any last thoughts before we move to brain injuries?